Jovan Buha! Buha!
Yo, I'm Jovan Buha, NBA reporter for Buha's Block, and welcome to another live show. Just got back from crypto.com arena, kind of. I actually left at halftime. Your boy is not feeling well, but caught the rest of the second half from home. So I will be going a little bit shorter tonight, but knowing me, I will still go an hour and a half, 2 hours as I do. But Lakers beat the Miami Heat 130-120 for arguably their most impressive win of the season, considering the opponent, considering the stylistic clash between these two teams and the polar opposite nature in some regards. Also withstood off shooting performances by Luka Doncic and Austin Reaves. Both players went 9 for 22, yet despite that, the Lakers still found a way to put up a season high point total with 130 and also a season high in the first half with 77. So we have a lot to get into on today's show. But before we get started, you guys know the drill. For those watching on YouTube, please be sure to hit that subscribe button, turn on channel notifications, and like and comment on this video. For those listening on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or your podcast platform of choice, please be sure to follow, download, and leave a 5-star review. Shout out to the Late Night Gang. Shout out to everybody in the chat. Let's get into it. So, overarching thought, there are several ways we can take this, but I want to highlight LaRavia and Marcus Smart and how great those guys have been this season for the Lakers. Those guys have been great additions, and bringing back last season's core for the most part. There were obviously some holes within the rotation. We could lump DeAndre Ayton into this as well. He obviously did not play today. He missed the game due to the back spasms that he started suffering in the first half of the Memphis game. So he was a late scratch. They end up starting Jaxson Hayes, who I will highlight a bit later. But LaRavia and Marcus Smart specifically tonight, looking at their numbers, LaRavia, 25 points, 10 of 13 shooting, continues to shoot the ball incredibly effectively, is a 3-level option for the Lakers. He had several cuts and offensive rebound putbacks and scoring around the basket, also scored a couple middies, and then also hitting a couple threes tonight, getting to the free throw line as well. So he's been an offensive revelation for LA over the last few games, starting with that Minnesota performance, goes 10 for 11, then 5 for 8 last game, and 10 for 13 tonight. He has found his groove. He has figured out his offensive role. And I really like him as not just a connecting piece offensively, because that feels a little like reductive in terms of what he can do. But I really like him as a second side option and a guy who can rack a closeout, get into the paint, keep the wheels moving offensively, but also create his own shot, whether that is him getting to the rim, drawing a foul, whether that is him potentially getting cut off and then either making a kick out pass or in a last resort situation, just stopping, pump faking, drawing a foul or hitting a midi. And then also as a guy who, when you swing a kick out pass to, he can knock down a 3. So I just think he's been awesome for LA and brings a certain level of, again, like he's just a little bit different than the non Luka Austin options offensively in terms of his ability to do multiple things and to be a threat from all 3 levels. Rui, to an extent, is like that. He's just a different type of ball handler, and Rui is more of a line drive. Like he's either trying to get to the rim or he's going to keep the ball moving. Whereas Jake, there's a little bit more, and people are calling him Jake and Bake, right? Like he's kind of got that shake and bake craft and guile to his game. He's not the most explosive or quickest guy, though. He did have a nice lob finish on a fast break pass from Austin, but like he's just adding an element to the Lakers offense that I don't think they've quite had from their role playing shooting forwards, and just some offensive wrinkles that have been really important to this group, including just making shots, right? Like that's a big part of it as well. But I think there's a little bit more to his offensive game than just that. And then with Marcus Smart, he was awesome tonight. There were so many little things that he did. Again, he's now having one of these plays seemingly nightly, where he early in the game, I believe he disrupts a handoff and immediately throws the ball over his shoulder out to Rui, who's streaking down for a dunk. And like he's having these like one man fast break situations where he causes a turnover and immediately pitches it ahead to a streaking teammate, and that player scores. So he's doing that on a nightly basis. But there's also a bunch of little things with him. Like one thing I really liked late, that he kind of undid it by picking up a foul on the very next possession. But there was the possession midway through the fourth quarter where the Lakers are pressuring the Heat and Marcus forces the ball out of bounds. There's 17 seconds left on the shot clock, which means the Heat have 1 second to get the ball into the front court. And Marcus immediately realizes that and calls for the Lakers to press defensively. And all of a sudden they arrange in a press, and then they end up passing the ball into the front court to Jovic, and Marcus fouls him from behind. And again, kind of like undoes some of the success of that possession defensively. But I thought that was one of those things that like he just has this keen awareness with time and score and the little tricks of the trade that are, you know, I think LeBron has that, Luka and Austin, but I think especially defensively, he's just constantly going and going and going. And there's just all these little things that he does that to me are invaluable to this group. And in some ways is like, I've made the comparison before as like the spiritual successor to DFS. And I think we've seen some of that with Marcus, but I think he's been even a more impactful defender and being able to defend multiple positions, but also similar to Jake, the ability to attack from the second side, to run offense, to bring the ball up the floor, to run pick and rolls. Like the shot continues to be a work in progress with Marcus. Did go 3 for 7 from deep tonight, 43%, 4 of 9 overall. But he's just been really useful. And both of the guys, like Marcus, it was more so that first preseason game. Jake obviously had a little bit of a slower ramp up in terms of the acclimation process, and has had conversations with JJ Redick and Rob Pelinka to kind of figure out his role and just get him more comfortable. But now that he's gotten comfortable, Jake LaRavia over the last 3 games, you could argue, has been the Lakers' third best player. And I think he's been really impactful. And I don't anticipate that, like, he's not going to be dropping 20 points every single night, but for him to be the Lakers' 6th option, maybe 5th, 6th option, right? Like one at full strength, you have Luka, LeBron, Austin, DeAndre Ayton is going to get a certain amount of shots. Rui is going to get a certain amount of shots, either as a starter or a 6th man. And Jake is now kind of like right in that mix behind those top 5. For your 6th option to be able to uncork a 20-point performance on any given night, like that just shows the depth of the Lakers offense and just the skill and the talent that they have on that end of the floor. So I really like, of course, Luka and Austin, despite the off shooting nights for them, Luka had a triple double, Austin still had 11 assists. So those guys like still found ways to be really effective. And I will touch on them in a second, but I just really wanted to acknowledge the performances of Jake LaRavia and Marcus Smart. And especially with Jake, like the Lakers have had this hole off of the bench in terms of having a 6th man type or having a consistent scorer. And Jake is starting to fill that hole right now. In like looking at the rest of the group, obviously they're shorthanded with no Ayton, no Gabe Vincent, no LeBron, not in that order, but looking at the rest of the group, it was 9 points for the other 3 players who played, 25 for Jake. So he really carried the bench offense, and that's something that the Lakers have desperately needed. So I think he's, again, finding a certain rhythm right now that will pay dividends later in the season. And with Marcus, he is pure chaos, often in a positive way. And I think that's something that the Lakers have needed. He leads the group in plus minus, and similar to DFS, I don't think that's a coincidence. The Lakers need that type of player surrounding their offensive talent, and Marcus has done that early in the season. In terms of notable performers, mentioned Luka, 29, 11, and 10, 5 turnovers, but when you're handling the ball as much as he is, it's understandable. 9 for 22 shooting, so an off shooting night by Luka standards, just 1 for 11 on threes, 9%, but still got to the free throw line 12 times, 10 for 12, 83% there. Lakers are plus 14 in his 38 minutes, second best mark on the team behind just Jaxson Hayes. So Luka, off shooting night, it's going to happen, but he still found ways to be effective. He still was dominating the Heat's defense, and they paid so much attention to him that a lot of the other guys ate because of the opportunities created from Luka, either individually or specifically in pick and roll two-man actions. Then Austin, 26 points, 4 rebounds, 11 assists, 3 turnovers. He also shot 9 for 22 from the floor, 41%, 4 for 14 on 3, so a little bit better, but just 29% for him. 4 for 5 at the free throw line. And with Austin, another like rough shooting performance, and obviously didn't have the same impact offensively that Luka had, or even on the glass. But I thought there was a couple of big sequences from Austin where it's like 5-ish minutes left, 5.5 minutes left. Lakers are up 4, 114 to 110. He has Jovic in a ISO situation, and he's like slipping. He's kind of losing his balance. He's fumbling the ball, and he just lofts up this sort of a prayer from like 14, 16 feet that goes in, and that extends the lead to 16. Next play out, gets out in transition, finds LaRavia for the lob. And then, so like right there, bang, bang sequence of LA's up 4. All of a sudden, LA's up 8, and Austin was instrumental in that. And then he also had that big 3, I think it was like might have been 122 to 112 or something. And Miami was kind of just still hanging around, and he hits a 3, goes up to 125, 112, or might have been 114. But that was basically a dagger shot where from that point on, Miami just was never really had a chance to make a comeback at that point. Like the game was pretty much already settled, but that was a nice little dagger from him. Jaxson Hayes, we have to talk about Jaxson Hayes, which I will save one of the takeaways for Jaxson, but 15 points, 5 rebounds, 1 assist, 1 steal, 1 block, 7 for 7 from the floor, 1 for 1 from 3. His first 3-pointer since January 2nd, 2023. We had not seen this from Jaxson as a Laker. He had never made a 3-pointer as a Laker, and New Orleans actually shifted him to the 4 momentarily when they were doing the Valanciunas Jaxson Hayes experimenting with playing like the double big look. And he started to take some threes at that point, but obviously had not done so as a Laker. So that was a big moment for Jaxson, but again, more on him in a little bit. Rui, 15 points, 6 rebounds, 2 assists, 6 of 12 shooting, 3 for 5, had, I believe, 10 points in the first quarter, 8 or 10 early points regardless, and certainly set a tone, getting out in transition, hitting threes. And I thought, really solid on the offensive end for Rui as per usual. Marcus already mentioned 11 points, 3 rebounds, 4 assists, 2 steals, and a block. That block was incredible, by the way, on Jaime Jaquez. Blocks, like, gets up high. That was like LeBron style block where he's like full extension. He almost looked like a swimmer in that sequence, and just blocks it off of Jaquez from behind, goes off of Jaquez's chest out of bounds, and just another shrewd, heady play from Marcus Smart. Jake LaRavia off the bench, 25 points, 8 rebounds, 3 assists, 4 steals. The 4 steals, like he was active defensively, and that's the thing. Like from a foot speed perspective, he's not the quickest guy, and speedsters or really athletic guys can beat him off the dribble. But I think the underrated thing with Jake is he's got really good hands. And then he's also a bigger dude at like 230, 235. So a lot of times he will leverage his strength and his physicality on drives to slow guys down. So maybe his feet aren't necessarily doing it, but if he can at least like kind of keep up, he can often body guys, and that will, that bumping will kind of slow them down a little bit on drives. But 4 steals from him. And then we have to highlight Bronny James, who played 18 minutes, including some minutes in crunch time, in a game that was not decided against a pretty good Heat team, a team that's been playing really well offensively. And 2 points. So he had the lob from Austin, which is one of many highlight plays in this game from LA, but 2 assists and just a couple of nice driving kick situations for Bronny, where like was not doing too much, was just fitting in and keeping the wheels moving offensively, similar to what we've seen from Jake LaRavia, Marcus Smart, Gabe Vincent, like just simple driving kick basketball. And that's what you want to see from him, not trying to do too much, not trying to look for his shot, in outside of the flow of the offense. And then 3 steals for Bronny. Like, I think this might have been his best game as a pro, at least with the Lakers, and not counting the G League. Certainly his best defensive game. Like, I thought he did a really good job, and Miami's defense, he does. They are a bit of a smaller team, especially in the backcourt, and I thought that played to some of his strengths. But we've talked about before, like, LA has been grooming him to be more of an offensive player, where I think his path to minutes and to a role at the NBA level is on the defensive end, and I think it's been mixed results at best, and that's probably being kind. But tonight was I thought a step in the right direction on that end. And like, he was a guy who just 1 for 4 offensively. Like, I don't expect him to be a big offensive contributor, at least with the current state of this group. But if he can just be in there and help move the ball and attack closeouts, or if guys are going to play off of him, put pressure on the defense, and then also just be solid defensively, like, that's all you can really ask for from Bronny. And then, in terms of stat of the night, I'm going to go with a season high 15 3-pointers for LA. They still haven't really had the performance of like just the avalanche of threes. And that, I think, is still something that's due to come based on how much Luka and Austin in particular are dissecting defenses methodically in the pick and roll. So it feels like there's going to be the night they hit 17, 18, 20, 21 threes. That's going to come at some point. But so far, they have not really shot the ball well from deep, and despite that, they've still been awesome offensively. But tonight, a season high 15 3-pointers, 33 assists, which was the second most they've had this season, just behind the road Minnesota win, and then 12 turnovers also tied their lowest total of the season. So just from they did have the rough stretch in the third quarter where Miami was pressing and went zone, and that was something that I think they need to review on film. But just from like a decision-making, ball handling, passing perspective, I thought this was right up there with the best performance of the season, any of them. And then that also was reflected by the shot making. And you had several guys like Marcus Smart shoot the ball well for really the first time on like higher volume. Rui, obviously, Austin hit a few, Jake hit a couple, Dalton hit an important one in the second half. So like you just saw some progress, I think, from this group offensively in that regard. Then takeaway number 1, I think this was arguably LA's toughest test of the season. And I say that, of course, Golden State is one of the best teams in the league and in the West. Minnesota is the team that knocked them out last year. Portland is playing at a really high level, who the Lakers will be playing tomorrow on the second night of a back-to-back in Portland. That's a pretty tough second night of a back-to-back game. But from a stylistic perspective, Miami was first in the league in pace. The Lakers are among the league bottom dwellers in pace. They prefer to play slow. And you have this team that doesn't set a lot of ball screens. They're actually last in the NBA in ball screens. And it's one of the lowest numbers of all time currently. And we'll see how that changes when Tyler Hero comes back. But this was a group where like you have 3 to 4 guys who can, in some lineups, all 5 guys are capable ball handlers who could take you off the dribble. They're running this like unique offensive system where they're spacing the floor out and just basically driving at your chest and trying to beat you one-on-one off the dribble. We know the Lakers ball pressure and one-on-one man defense is not good. And they certainly struggled tonight at times, particularly in that third quarter. But there were some rough stretches of this game for LA defensively. And even all things considered, they still gave up 120. They had a 114 defensive rating, which is around average-ish. So like not a good defensive performance by LA, but they withstood the runs. And how many times when Miami goes on that run and cuts it down to 4, I believe they closed the third on an 8-0 run to get it within 4 going into the fourth. How many times have we seen the Lakers lose that type of game going back to last season or a couple seasons ago or even 3 seasons ago? Like we have seen, and really against Miami too, like Miami has had a couple of comeback wins against LA over the last few years. And I just felt like I continue to harp on LA's resilience as a group, and that was something we saw in that fourth quarter. But I think from like a stylistic perspective of having multiple ball handlers, multiple shooters, and also being a team that we saw in that third, they were pressing LA. Miami zone has been one of the toughest zones to figure out for teams over the last few years. Eric Spoelstra is first ballot Hall of Fame coach, one of the best coaches in the league, if not arguably the best, and newly named Team USA coach. Like, this is a tough team, and no, they did not have Tyler Hero, they did not have Norm Powell, but the Lakers, as aforementioned, did not have LeBron, Ayton, and Vincent. And despite some of the stylistic things of having guys who could like theoretically hold their own decently against Luka and Austin still having off nights, and Miami actually getting to the free throw line more than the Lakers. The Lakers got killed at the free throw line in terms of attempts. Miami was plus 13 in terms of free throw attempts. Despite all that, they still won this game by double digits. And in a larger way, to me, this is like LA is really just, I mean, they're 5-2. They are 3-1 with Luka. They are humming right now. But I thought, like, from a just like testing LA in various ways, like, this is a team that loves to push the pace and plays a unique style on both ends, and a style that is not really suited for LA's strengths in some ways. And LA passed the test. And to me, like, this was arguably their most impressive win of the season, I would say. And also, for what it's worth, the best offense they played this season. Miami entered tonight 9th in offense. None of the other teams LA have played up to this point were top 10 in offense. And Portland was the closest. They're 12th. And then all the other teams they played were below average offenses. So early sample size, right? And some of that's going to change. But I thought this was the toughest team to defend. We saw elements of that throughout the night, but LA withstood several blows from Miami and then also dealt their own. And that fourth quarter could have easily gotten ugly. They could have lost this game, and instead they rallied and figured out a way to win it. Takeaway number 2 for me is going to be Jaxson Hayes and the value of hard rolling. And looking at like the past 6 quarters, so going to the second half of the Memphis game and this entire game, with Jaxson back in his role as the starting center and looking more like he did, like it was 2025, like early 2025 Jaxson, post AD injury / trade Jaxson Hayes. He's been awesome. And he hit a pick and pop 3, which like Austin ran out of options, jumped, did the cardinal sin of jumping without knowing where you're going to pass the ball, throws it over his shoulder. It bounces. That's how much space Jaxson Hayes had. They were like, we're not even like thinking of Jaxson Hayes as a threat out here. Bounces to him, and then he casually drains a pick and pop 3. But more so than that, obviously, we saw several lob plays with Jaxson, and especially in that first quarter, like the first 6 minutes, just the violent nature of the way that he rolls with the aggression and the speed and the athleticism and the value of that collapsing Miami's defense. And part of that might be more of like a Miami specific or like this type of defense specific. But I think it's something that the Lakers have to figure out, because I thought Luka, and it's tough to compare Luka and Jaxson to Luka and DeAndre, because Luka and Jaxson have far more reps than Luka and DeAndre. But Jaxson and DeAndre are also much different rollers and screeners. And I think Jaxson is far more of the Derek Lively, Daniel Gafford type than DeAndre Ayton is. Now, DeAndre Ayton has been awesome in the short roll, and he is actually the league leader in that range, like right in terms of field goals made, right in front of the free throw line. But that's a different style of play, and it's just a different offensive style than I think the optimal style for Luka, going back to his time in Dallas and also his time now with the Lakers. And I think that's just something to kind of like monitor, and I think LA is going to have to figure it out, because they have had a lot of success with Ayton in the short roll. And again, he's shooting over 50, like he's automatic nearly from there. I just think that's a little bit of an easier pass and sequence to game plan for and to try to take away, rather than the threat of like when Jaxson and Luka or Jaxson and Austin are clicking, I don't know what you do with that, right? Because if you're cutting off the lob, then the skip pass is there or the weak side pass is there. And then LA like eventually breaks down your defense. And I thought that first 6 minutes of this game was as good as LA's offense has looked all season. And I think a big part of that was the role that Jaxson was playing specifically as a hard roller toward the rim and being a lob threat. So that's something that I just like, to be clear, Jackson's not better than DeAndre Ayton. Jaxson is not going to start over DeAndre Ayton. That's not what I'm saying at all. But I think it's sort of like, kind of like with running backs in the NFL, when you have a certain starter playing a certain way that maybe is a little bit different than the quarterback or the offense coordinator or coach wants to play. And then you have like the backup and maybe the starter gets injured. And then all of a sudden the backup comes in and he's crushing it in the way that like that team wants to play offensively. That's kind of more like this. Like I think Jaxson is a more natural fit. Now he's not a better player and he's not a better finisher and he's not as skilled or versatile offensively as Ayton. But I just think like if I'm DeAndre Ayton, I'm watching this film and seeing like, how can I apply some of this? And he's never going to be Jaxson Hayes offensively, just like Jaxson Hayes isn't going to be DeAndre Ayton offensively. But I think it does add a different wrinkle to the offense that I think is harder to game plan for. And then final takeaway, this one will be quick, but bringing back a series I did last year where we do a quick review of a potential trade target for the Lakers when they play them. And tonight, obviously, Andrew Wiggins is the player that has been a hot name for the Lakers going back to last offseason. Finished with 15 points, 9 rebounds, including 3 offensive rebounds, 1 assist, 1 steal, 1 block, 4 turnovers, 6 for 16 shooting, 38%, 1 for 6 on threes, 17%. He has not shot threes well this season, 2 for 3 on free throws, 3 fouls, and was a minus 15 in his 37 minutes. So it was an interesting audition for Andrew Wiggins, right? Like Rui got off to the hot start. Then eventually Marcus Smart had a big performance and Jake LaRavia had a big performance. In terms of pros with Wiggins, I thought the offensive activity with his constant cutting and being able to, like, again, 9 rebounds, 3 offensive. I thought you saw like some Vando elements with him. And like kind of a little bit of some of the cutting and activity around the basket that you get with Vando that you can also get with Rui, more so the cutting. You saw that. Defensively, I thought he held up his own. He was the primary guy on Austin, and that was interesting. Like they put Davion Mitchell on Luka, and the Lakers were, of course, playing the matchups and trying to get Jovic or Drew Smith or Fontecchio or Larson switched on to some of those guys. But I thought Wiggins, like, it was a solid to good performance defensively. Offensively, with the shot making and the turnovers, could have been sharper, could have been better. I don't want to overreact in either direction to a single game, but it was, it's a little bit different when, like, sometimes these things do impact how a team perceives a player. Like there's the running joke, I feel like, with every fan base, that player X has a good game against them, and then the next summer their front office ends up signing that player, right? So these things like do matter to like a minimal extent, but a little bit. And I thought Wiggins, like, you could see the value he could bring to the Lakers. I don't think it was quite the like lockdown stopper defensive performance, but it was still a solid defensive performance. And then offensively, I don't think he's going to handle the ball. If he were a Laker, I don't think he would handle the ball as much as maybe he did at times for Miami. But the shot, I think, has been the biggest concern for me, is just he has not shot the ball well, and small sample size to start the season. But you obviously have to monitor that into December, January, etc. But those are my quick thoughts on Wiggins. I'm sure you guys have a bunch to say in the chat. But with all that said, let's get into the Q&A here. First one from U to the We. Thank you for the super chat. Crazy. Good chance we're 7-0 without crazy injuries. Yeah. Looking at the schedule, I mean, the Golden State one, obviously the primary one was LeBron being out, unless I'm blanking I mean, that's the one. So, I mean, I guess you're saying if LeBron was there, yeah, they're probably 7-0 or 6-1. And then, like, I mean, the Portland one for sure was a tough one. Second night of a back-to-back, no Luka. And then you also lose Marcus and Gabe for that one. You just don't have the requisite ball handling. So, I mean, it's tough to like wipe a team's injury slate entirely clean. And the Lakers have had so many injuries that. So I think the one that you probably get back, like LeBron, we knew was out from the beginning of training camp, right? Like that's been a thing. So I don't know if we can revisionist history or rewrite history with that. But if you just say like Gabe and Marcus maybe don't get injured in the random ways they have, or DeAndre Ayton or whatever, they're probably 6-1. And still though, 5-2 against the schedule with how many injuries they've had, it's really hard to complain. I think the Lakers, it's been a very, very encouraging start for LA. Michael D, 29-point triple-double with 3 steals off night. Fire Nico. Yeah, no, I mean, look, like that was kind of the point I was trying to make. I think I mentioned his steals. Maybe I didn't, but yeah, he had 3 steals. Really high. I mean, honestly, stat of the night might have been 14 steals for LA. You could throw that in there. Really good job from them on the defensive end. And that, like, it does feel like LA is one of those defenses where the possession either ends in like a high quality shot for the opponent, or LA like turning them over or block. Like it's either like LA makes a like ridiculous defensive play or you know, just a steal or whatever, or the opponent gets a good look. Like it's very like binary of the quality of attempt from an opponent, unless LA can turn them over. But yeah, no, I mean, Luka, again, 29-point triple-double. There are worse off nights. And again, off night. But yeah, fire Nico. Connor Phillips, thank you for the super chat. My biggest takeaway from the stretch of games is that this team doesn't fold. They always respond well to adversity. Couldn't say the same in years past. Exactly. That's why I've been trying to harp on that the last few games. Like the resiliency from this group has been just really impressive, and something that has not been the DNA of this team. If anything, I feel like how many comeback losses have they had, right? And how many blown leads and stuff throughout the years. Like they've obviously been an elite crunch time team because of LeBron, in the past because of AD as well, and Austin, and then now more recently because of Luka. But it's just like they've also had like how many losses to lottery teams where they get run off the floor, or maybe they're up by a little bit at halftime, they get blown out in the second half because of the third quarter or whatever. And this group they've taken every, I mean, even the Portland game, even the Golden State game, like, you know, people called it a fake comeback in the fourth quarter, myself included, but that they did not go away in that game. In the Portland game, they did not go away, and they tried to make it a game late. So like even their 2 losses, I would say they lost with honor, and sure, execution and guys being in and out like affected that, but they don't, I wouldn't say they have like a bad loss to start the season. Like the Golden State loss was, to me, more so like this group just hasn't played together, and there's a little bit of frustration with like the process of the preseason. But outside of that one, the Portland one was totally justifiable, especially it's like aged well with how Portland has looked. They get a crack at them tomorrow. And yeah, no, I mean, it's been, again, a really impressive and encouraging start to the season. They see me trolling, they can't win. Like it, and I like your profile picture here. Jake LeBron James is pretty good. I mean, yeah, he's. I don't know if I'd compare him to LeBron, but he. I mean, I don't know. He's been great in these last 3 games, and it feels like the genie's out of the bottle, right? The toothpaste is out of the tube, and I don't know how you put it back in. And I think I had the question, I believe it was last stream, about like the 5th starter. And I think that might be its own, like I might have to do an episode at some point this week. Like we're still a couple weeks away at least from LeBron returning and that being a real conversation. So we're going to have more of a sample size and just more data and just, film to break down and look at in terms of like who makes the most sense as the fifth starter, I will still contend that I think Marcus Smart brings a defensive element and an energy element that no one else can quite match other than maybe Vando, but he's so limited offensively that it's different with Marcus out there compared to Vando. But like Rui, the way that we kind of just gloss over 15 for Rui, but if you look at his 15, just 9 against Memphis, but before that, 17 in Minnesota, 16 versus Portland, 18 versus Sacramento, 23 versus Minnesota again. So like Rui's been steady and Rui has been awesome on the offensive end. I do think there's been a little bit of regression on the defensive end, particularly off the ball. It has been rough at times, but like he's so important to the offense as like the most reliable shot, at least like floor spacer and 3-point shooter right now, that it's like hard to reduce his role or potentially move him to the bench. He's also a guy who likes to start. Then you have Jake LaRavia, who's arguably outplaying both Rui and Marcus Smart right now. And it's like, does he have a shot to be that fifth guy? And he is, I've made the case before, kind of like arguably their best two-way player in terms of being a positive on both sides. I think that's kind of played out to start the season. But, it depends kind of, I think if Marcus is making his shots, how Rui continues to defend. Like, it's kind of up in the air. I would still lean Marcus personally, but if you want to argue Rui for the offense, or you want to argue Jake for the offense and kind of the two-way play, like you could do that as well. But and that's, to be clear, it's a good problem to have multiple candidates for the fifth starter spot and multiple guys making a strong case. But yeah, I mean, it's Jake has been awesome. Kerwin, thank you for the super chat. Good game by the Lakers tonight. Feels like this year is an audition for who gets to stay next year outside of our top 3 guys. Who do you think stays? Good question. So it's tough because they have so many potential free agents that you just don't know how things are going to play out in the free agent market. And with some of the, like with the guy like Ayton and Smart, it will ultimately be determined by, can they stay healthy? I think if they both can stay healthy, they will outperform their contracts, and it would make sense to opt out next summer. And that puts pressure on the Lakers to then re-sign them at higher numbers. But there's obviously a chance that one or both suffers injuries or regression or whatever, and then they end up opting in. I think the probably the safest bet, like the low-hanging fruit, is Adu Thero. I think he's a guy who, among the outside of the top 3, like he's the guy I probably have the most confidence being on the roster next season. Then I would probably go to Jake LaRavia because he's under contract for next year. Vando's probably another guy who is like playing in general better, but I do not think he has rehabbed his value to the point of being even a neutral asset. Like the offensive limitations are what they are. And I still think that that's going to be a difficult contract to trade. Dalton, I still think is among the most likely players to be traded along with Gabe and Maxey. So I don't think much has changed there. So I would say Jake and Adu and Vando are probably the 3 that are the most likely outside of the top 3. Then you have, to a less, like Rui, the front office and ownership have loved Rui since he got there, and I suspect they will try to retain him, if not potentially even extend him. Like they can't extend him deep or right before the offseason. And then Smart and Ayton, I think, are just a couple wild cards where it's hard to say. So I mean, I think there's a possibility that this group pretty much stays the same. Maybe they lose LeBron to retirement, or maybe he goes elsewhere, and then they have a little bit of flexibility to either pay some of the current guys a little bit more or add like one more piece. But I think that like as of right now, barring a trade, which I still think is a possibility at some point, I think there's a good chance like most of the group is back. But to your point, I 100% agree. This is an audition, and right now things are good, right? And everyone's kind of playing relatively well, if not really well. But that's not going to sustain. You don't have an 82 game season where every single player is like a B+, A-, right? Like guys are going to fluctuate. Guys are going to get injured. Guys are going to go through shooting slumps. Guys are going to go through periods where for whatever reason they're not performing well. So we need to have like the full sample size to be able to assess where things are at in April, May, and June. Braden, thank you for the super chat. Jake Jovan LaRavia, wow, 4 steals. He's been playing great. Brate, can you see him taking Rui's starting spot when LeBron comes back? So I just touched on that. Like, I think you can make a case for it, right? Looking at it tonight, he played more than Rui for what it's worth, but more points, more offensive rebounds, more defensive rebounds, more rebounds overall, more assists, more steals, same number of turnovers, more shots, more makes. Not as many threes. Rui hit 1 more 3. Jake got to the free throw line for 4 attempts. Rui did not attempt a free throw. And then they were +8 in Jake's minutes, +7 in Rui's minutes. So I think undeniably he's been better than Rui's. Like from the Minnesota game on, he has been better. I've also made the case that I think he just has a more well-rounded game. And really the two things you could say that Rui does better in theory are shooting and cutting, but I've actually been really impressed with LaRavia's cutting and off-ball movement. And like, even against like the zone and the press and stuff, there were times where he flashed middle and I thought made like the right call of whether to drive, whether to kick the ball back out. I just think he processes the game at a higher level than Rui. And I think that like his combination of ball handling and playmaking and decision-making are all 3 of those things. I think there's a notable gap between the 2 guys. Like when Rui's at his best, it's like flash or catch a pass and shoot. And maybe it's attack, a closeout. But like, I think Rui's, if we're looking at like, kind of like you have a menu of options and this is like a video game or something. Rui has maybe 2 or 3 options. Jake's is like 5, 6, 7. Like there's a lot more in terms of, just what Jake can do. So now at the same, like Rui has a growing sample size of being a very, very good, if not just downright elite shooter. He's had back-to-back seasons shooting 40+%. This season, once again, is shooting over 40%. So Rui is a sniper and Rui is a laser, to quote JJ Redick. That cannot, like, especially around the playmaking of Luka, Austin, and eventually LeBron, we cannot like overlook that or downplay how important that is. At the same time, Jake LaRavia became a laser last season, albeit on relatively low volume. And now we have 2 for 3 against Miami, 1 for 3 against Memphis, 5 for 6 against Minnesota. So some quick math here. That's 8 for 12, 75% on threes over his last 3 games. So that's not going to sustain. But if he can be around a 40% 3-point shooter on, say, like 3.5, 4 attempts per game, I think it becomes a real conversation, because at that point, it's like the shooting is close enough between Rui and Jake that maybe the only argument you can make at that point is Rui is like the incumbent and he cares about starting. And I think at that, like, for me, I totally understand the politics within a team, within a locker room. But at the same time, if you're serious about competing for a championship, it has to be about what's best for the group. And sometimes you have to make tough decisions. And if Jake is rebounding better, passing better, defending better, and just being more impactful on both sides, like, I don't really see the argument. So I think there's definitely a chance he takes it. I still think Smart is probably the easier, I've made this point before, he's probably the easier sell to Rui because he's a former starter on multiple conference finals teams. With Jake versus Rui, like, I think there are enough similarities where it's just a harder sell, whereas Marcus, it's like neither guy is diving on the floor the way that Marcus is, right? In doing some of the things that Marcus is. So I think it's a little bit easier of like, hey, Rui, we're sorry, but like, we need a defender in this starting group. We're going to move you to the bench and you're going to be like the 6th man or whatever. Whereas if it's Jake, I just think it's a little bit of a harder, sell job to get him on board with that. At the same time, though, I think it should be a meritocracy and it should be whoever's the best should start, right? So up to this point, you could make a case Rui's been the best, like with the totality of the season. Jake is quickly narrowing that. And I think Jake's highs have been higher than Rui's highs. And then you also have Marcus, who is this just like energy, ball of energy and verve and tenacity that neither Jake or Rui can really match. So again, as I said a little bit earlier, like I think it's a good problem to have. I think you can make a case for all three guys. I still stand behind Marcus probably making the most sense, especially if his shot comes around and he looks more like he did, a few years ago, which I think he's starting to. But you couldn't talk me into Jake as the fifth guy. Like I think it's up for grabs right now. Light him up. I'm hearing we miss DFS talk less and less. Do you think Jake outproducing him in every statistical category, including stocks the last 3 to 4 games, has something to do with that? Certainly. I want to be clear. Like, I mean, look, DFS isn't even playing right now. So that in and of itself is a win for Jake. Like he'd have to be playing pretty poorly for it to not be just like already kind of a net positive that he's available, and DFS is coming off this ankle situation, which he was dealing with going back to earlier in the offseason. However, like I think there are some key differences between them. I think DFS is, for what the Lakers asked DFS to do, I think he was probably better in that specific role than Jake was. But if we were looking at these guys in more of a vacuum and just like who's more skilled, who's producing more, who can do more, I think obviously the answer is Jake, right? But DFS was instrumental in the Lakers small ball groups, and I think he's a better rim protector than Jake, and I think he's a better backline help guy and like overall communicator than Jake. Like I would feel more comfortable putting DFS on a 5 than Jake on a 5. That said, when you factor in the ball handling, the playmaking, the decision making, the ability to get hot, like we did see DFS get hot, but he's far more of like a pick and pop or catch and shoot guy. Definitely more of an above the break guy. Jake's getting out in transition. He's cutting. He's moving. Far better offensively. Like I don't think that is disputable, right? Like DFS had a very specific role offensively for this group as a pick and pop guy, as a trailer in transition, and occasionally a catch and shoot guy, but again, more so up above the break. So like it's totally like different offensively. I think defensively, I still think DFS is probably the better defender. I don't think we can just look at blocks and steals, but the offensive gap is big enough between them that I think like the smaller defensive gap, Jake's offensive contributions outweigh whatever is the defensive gap between them. And Jake's still been solid defensively. So I don't want to paint it as like, I'm not saying he's been bad. I'm not saying he's been below average. I think he's started to come into his own and look more comfortable on that end. But to your point, like, yeah. And I also think it's honestly, to me, kind of a combination of Jake and Marcus erases DFS, where Marcus is the communicator. Marcus is doing some of the things that DFS did. That's why I continue to call him the spiritual successor, because like Jake's not that type of talker. He's not that type of communicator. He's not going to call out LeBron. He's not going to call out Luka. He's not going to, maybe Austin, because they're boys. But like Marcus will call those guys out. Marcus will call out JJ. Marcus will call out anybody. And he's got the gravitas and he's got the experience to do that. So that's where I see a bit of a distinction, where to me, it's actually more so the combination of Jake and Marcus. Like Jake straight up, I think is a better player than DFS, but they are different in terms of like the roles they served. And then now you add in Marcus though, and it's like a no-brainer of if it's between Jake and Marcus versus DFS, you of course would rather have Jake and Marcus. And then you add in DeAndre Ayton, and like this is definitely a better roster. Danica, thank you for the super chat. Imagine if this team didn't give fans plus JJ heart attacks. So definite like personal highlight of the game, other than the Jaxson pick and pop, was JJ just absolutely losing his mind on that. Believe it was late in the third quarter, and the Lakers were kind of zoning up, and they give up a lob pass, and JJ immediately calls a timeout and just stomps onto the floor and just is losing his mind in a way that only JJ, no one quite has a crash out or a meltdown like JJ. I've fully expected him to snap the clipboard. Like if you saw the way he grabbed it, he grabbed it very aggressively, and I was waiting for the Steve Kerr whiteboard snap. But yeah, I mean, like there were certainly some moments of especially that second half of the third quarter and maybe a little bit of the fourth, but what's a Lakers game without a little bit of drama, right? Well, that's just, it's par for the course. Ooh to the we. Golden State starters lost to Innie's bench. LA plus LBJ beats Golden State easy. Sure. I mean, definitely like we could play that game, right? And I think that's fair to deduce that. At the same time, like, you know, I don't know what this looks like in this hypothetical of like how much was LeBron active in the preseason, right? And I think it's easy to play the game of if you had player X, you would have won. But like to your larger point, like it is a game you could argue the Lakers would have won had they been like fully healthy, and they certainly could be 6-1 or 7-0 right now. But I think the encouraging thing to me is like how well they've played up to this point, and then imagining adding LeBron to this, and that's what like vaults them to maybe the third or even second best team in the West. I think you could make that argument, right? Like, oh, the funny thing is, I was talking to somebody earlier today, and we were kind of just joking around, talking through teams in the West, and I was like, it's really cute how we have all these conversations about this team and this contender ranking and this and that. And it's like, OKC is just steamrolling everybody, and they're 7-0. They have a plus 12 point differential. They're now the only undefeated team in the league because San Antonio lost tonight. And like, we could argue who's second, who's third, who's fourth, but OKC is clearly number one, and it's probably not close right now. But that's a conversation for a different. I mean, Lakers about to play them in 10 days, so we'll see how they stack up. Gerald, thank you for the super chat. Is this becoming I'm not sure. I don't see a question here. Let me know if you had a question. Classy K, you think DA will turn into AD with injuries? Thank you for the super chat. No, look, back spasms is something that's tough to deal with, and again, like for those who are tuning in now, just so you know, I'm very under the weather. I had to leave at halftime, and I'm losing my voice. My nose is a mess, so that's why I sound a bit stuffy. But back spasms are nothing to mess with, and I think for DeAndre's sake, I wish the Lakers just handled the situation a little bit cleaner in terms of just like coming out of early third quarter. We see Jaxson Hayes is out there. We see DeAndre Ayton's not on the bench. Just share that DeAndre Ayton's dealing with the back thing. We shouldn't find that out like 5 minutes left in the game when he finally returns to the bench, and they're putting that out there. Like, there was just rampant speculation on X about what was going on and different conspiracy theories as to why DeAndre wasn't out there. And I thought that did him a giant disservice, to be completely honest. But in terms of the back spasms, like the fact that he was probable and then got downgraded, obviously not like the best sign, but the fact that he was probable, I think, is a positive sign overall. We'll see if he could play tomorrow in Portland. I don't have a great read as of right now on that. If he doesn't play, then he does get a little bit of a break going into Wednesday's matchup with Victor Wembanyama in San Antonio, which is going to be a big game, of course. So, you know, but it is Portland, potential revenge on the road in Portland. So we'll see if he ends up playing. But I think AD has a far more extensive injury history than DeAndre Ayton. So I don't want to start going around with that. Shabugan, thank you for the super chat. Has Jackson working on threes? He was working on threes this offseason. If you saw some of the offseason film on him, just didn't think we were going to see that in a game. But he shot it in rhythm. He shot it with confidence, and he made it. So I don't think that it's something I would expect him to do like consistently. If you actually look at, so far as a Laker, he has attempted He was 0 for 11 going into tonight as a Laker, and he had not even attempted one this season yet. So I want to pump the brakes on Jaxson becoming a stretch big. However, I mean, if you look at earlier in his career, he hit 20 during the 2021-22 season. He hit 3 in 2022-23, 6 in 2020-2021. So he has shown an ability to make them at most at like 0.3 or so, 0.2, 0.3 per game, which is more than you would expect. I will note that I already think he's a better shooter than Vando. Maybe that's maybe that's a little rough analysis on my part, but that shot looked better than any of Vando's threes this season. And I would have more confidence in him taking them than Vando, which is probably more of a statement on Vando's shooting than Jackson's. But yeah, Jojo, thank you for the super chat. Do not see a question here. Arno de Capo, thank you for the super chat. Trade rumors have died down. Are they satisfied with what they have, or are they still exploring if there are any new candidates? Trade rumors have died down, but that's in part because this is not really trade season. Trade season starts kind of mid-December when the first wave of players who signed contracts this offseason become trade eligible. Then there's a second wave, January 15th, for the remainder of the players. So it depends on like bird rights and what percentages of their cap situation or exceptions they use to sign a player. But like a wave of guys will be eligible on December 15th. A wave of guys will be eligible January 15th. That's why if you look back at kind of like the timeline of trades, there are very rarely trades in November or even December. Like December, there's typically like 2, maybe 3 trades. Then you'll have like a sprinkle more in January. And then that week going into the trade deadline is when all the chaos happens, including the Luka trade, right? Like that technically happened within the 1 week mark of the trade deadline, in addition to Jimmy Butler and De'Aaron Fox and some of the other moves. So I would say with the Lakers right now, it's relatively quiet. They are playing well, and that will be a factor in terms of what type of move they potentially make or whether they feel they need to make a move. But I think the bigger thing driving the quiet nature, other than like them not really leaking stuff and being pretty close to the vest with all this, is more so we're still like 6-ish weeks away from trade season really starting. So I don't think there's much to talk about right now, right? Like we can talk about it, and the team is of course evaluating and considering different options, but realistically, most teams don't start trading until the second half of December. So we still got about 6 weeks to go on the early side. Damian, thank you for the super chat. Hi, Brate. Luka and AR best backcourt in the NBA. 100%. I've made this point before. It's a little tricky they're a backcourt offensively, but they're not a backcourt defensively. So that's like the tricky part here, because Luka defends forwards and not guards. So if we are just judging them on the offensive end, I think it's clear that they're the best offensive backcourt. You could throw in Tyrese Maxey and VJ Edgecombe, but I would like to see a larger sample size from both players. Like Maxey's looking like a top like 20, top 15 guy right now. And I don't know if that will sustain, but still like Luka's a better player. And then AR versus Edgecombe, like I just think even going back, like I think last year's version of Austin is probably better than Edgecombe, to say nothing of this year's version of Austin. And that's no shade at Edgecombe. I think he's going to be a multi-time all-star future franchise player. Like they are set up for the foreseeable future with that backcourt, as long as they don't screw it up. That's before even mentioning Jared McCain. Like that's a fun basketball team that I think all of a sudden looks like a potential top 4 team in the East. But there's levels to it. And we've seen Luka do it at the highest levels internationally, but also conference finals and just in the playoffs in general, and just the start of it, like his entire career, right? Like he's had one of the best starts to a career in NBA history, individually, statistically, all that stuff. And then Austin has gotten better every year. Last year averaged 25 and 6. This year is on pace to average more. So offensively, I think it's clearly them. Like you could also probably throw in Donovan Mitchell and Darius Garland. Defensively, of course, again, it's a little tricky because those other team like Edgecombe and Maxey guards, Mitchell and Garland guards. Luka does not guard, so it's like an offensive backcourt, not really a defensive backcourt. But if we're factoring in the defense, obviously they take a bit of a hit, but in comparison to some of the other top backcourts. At the same time, like, I think Maxey's been defending reasonably well to start the year. Edgecombe looks like a plus defender, but I don't think that shifts it, in my opinion, at least enough in their direction. And then with Garland and Mitchell, there are real concerns with those two defensively, largely in part because of just the size collectively. And that's also where I give Luka and Austin a bit of a boost here. Is Austin is 6'5". He's at a minimum average size for a shooting guard, if not a little bit bigger. And then Luka, of course, for a point guard is giant, right? So, right there with like the LeBron, Magic, and I don't want to throw Ben Simmons in there, but like that type of big ball handler where, a lot of these other guys are 6'2", 6'3", maybe 6'4", and that just limits, like, you can put bigger defenders on them, and then also you could attack them defensively. So I ultimately give it to Luka and Austin. And again, I think Cleveland and Philly are close-ish, but I do think there's like a notable gap. Hoops in Hollywood, thank you for the super chat. I like the anamorph style Alex Caruso. Is he developing into Michael Jordan there? I'm not sure. Starting to think Brooks fits more than Rui. I think, yeah. You can make that case. Like, they are, when I've compared these two before, my opinion hasn't really changed. Rui's a better offensive player. Brooks is a better defensive player. I think the Lakers have a lot of offensive firepower to the point that, like, the defensive end is really my only, like, I think this group is looking like a top 5 offense, and they're still scratching the surface of everybody's role and continuity and chemistry together. I've done all this without LeBron. I think this is gonna be a top 5, if not top 3 offense. Like, I'm even more confident in that assertion. I think my primary question overall with this group, aside from health, which with this group based on the start of the season has to be the biggest question, but like, health does apply to every situation. So I want to put that to the side. My biggest question is the defensive end, right? Because on balance, this has been a below average defense to start this season. There have been some really discouraging stretches in games, and the offense has been so great that I think it has papered over some of that, and it hasn't really just mattered because it's like, you just can't stop this team. So it's like, if they're an average defense and the best offense, or one of the best offenses, they're going to beat you more often than not. However, when you're playing the OKCs and whatever other teams you want to put close to that level, you're going to need to defend. Like, the Lakers are not just going to be able to outscore OKC. They might be able to outscore them once, maybe even twice. They're not winning a 7-game series against OKC just by outscoring them. OKC's defense is too good. They have elite rim protection. They have elite ball pressure. They turn you over. And even though Luka's performed well against them, Austin and LeBron also have had some big games against them in the past. Like, they will still score well, but they got to defend. And that's where I have some real questions. And that's ultimately why I do trend toward LA. Like, I still think LA has to trade for that 5th starter, whoever that is. Maybe that is Dylan Brooks. I will note he probably defends up a little bit more, and that it just continues to kind of play into the, like, LeBron defends up, Luka defends up, Jake LaRavia defends up. Vando can obviously defend multiple guys, but like, I think they need a more like athletic, slithery guy. But among the realistic options, Brooks isn't at or near the top, and he might ultimately be the best option, especially when looking at Phoenix's. They're 3-4 now. They've won a couple in a row, but I still think they're probably going to be a lottery team, and he ends up becoming available at some point. The good news for the Lakers is the New Orleans Pelicans are 0-6, and they do not own their pick. So if there's a way for LA to flip a pick for one of those 2 New Orleans wings, that would be a hell of a trade. Davion Parks thing for the super chat. I do not see a question. For those, there's been a couple of these super chats without questions. I've been only in the super chat channel. I will circle back into the full channel. So if you had a question that you weren't able to put in, just remind me and I will get to it. Light him up. Thank you for the super chat. Last game, Vando played 14 minutes tonight, just 10 minutes. Do you think JJ's confidence in him is waning? I don't think JJ had much confidence in Vando to begin with. And that's been a point I've been making since the summer. That's been a point I've made anytime we've had the starting lineup discussion. I think JJ values shooting and offense more than he does just about anything else. Anytime he's kind of in between two decisions, he tends to pick the offensive option. And Vando is just like, it's been, I don't really know how else to frame it other than like, it's just been a bit discouraging. We have not seen much offensive progress from him. I think the finishing has probably been a little bit better, but the shooting you could actually argue has been worse than last season. And that's like, this was, I mean, if I'm the Lakers coaching staff and I'm Vando, all I'm working on in the offseason is putbacks, catching in the short roll and along the baseline, and making reads and trying to finish from there, and then catch and shoot threes. And I think we've seen a little bit of progress from the other stuff, but the shooting is just such a, I mean, he's like, I will know, I think he's looked better as a backup center, and that's because he is a center offensively. Any other configuration with him, I think you're kind of, really mucking up your spacing and your offensive potential with Vando at the 4 or at the 3. So looking at it this season, he's not made a 3 this season. He is 0 for 6. And the volume is basically the same. It's been around 1 a game, but I mean, like, small sample size, but his shot didn't look good in the preseason. It has not looked good to start the season. So, I mean, maybe it is continuing to wane in Vando, or JJ's confidence in Vando is continuing to wane, to your point. But to be honest, I don't think it was very high to begin with. And outside of like the first 3 preseason games when he started him, he has shown that when this group is relatively at full strength, Vando's like a 15-minute a night player or less. The only times he plays more is when multiple starters are out. So like that's what I expect. Lokamin says he can't even catch lobs. Like, yeah, I mean, that's kind of your point. Like, or to your point, a lot of simple stuff around the basket. Like tonight, he even had a couple times where he tried to force stuff, and I forgot if it was Bam or Ware who blocked him. Like, he kind of tried to muscle through a shot around the basket, and it's just, it's not good. It's borderline unplayable. I think because of what the Lakers have, they need to play him. But yeah. Connor Phillips, are you going to show your potential t-shirt designs on stream? Not right now, but I would love to know from all of you what you would like to see from merch from me. I'm trying to finalize the merch here within the next like week or two. And definitely going to have Buha's block branding in terms of the word mark with Buha's block and the B logo that I have, and just kind of the say more like general or generic podcast branding. But if there are other things you guys want, thinking like Late Night Gang and 5 More Minutes and like some of the yo-yo and like some of the inside jokes with us, and some of that stuff with maybe stickers or whatnot. But there are other things you guys need or want, let me know. Eddie, any update on the rookie Adu? No, there was so he got recalled from South Bay, but JJ said he's doing live action, but he's not returned to full 5-on-5 yet. So as I've been saying, I said earlier in this week, I said I expected the early side to be mid this upcoming week, if not probably over the weekend, for him to be like fully cleared. And you got to think about it now. LA's traveling to Portland, then they'll have a day off on Tuesday. Then they probably shoot around, play San Antonio Wednesday. Then they go out onto a 5-game road trip. So maybe he's cleared and makes his debut on the road trip, but it's going to probably be hard for him to go through the necessary steps and be cleared before that point. Like maybe San Antonio at the earliest, but I would assume it's probably on the road trip. JB, will you be at tomorrow's game? I will not be. I'm not. I think my first official game that I'm going to on the road is going to be the Boston game. And then I'm probably traveling more second half of the season than first half. But yeah, I will not be at tomorrow's game. Jason, what are your thoughts on Royce O'Neal? I like Royce O'Neal. I think the one thing with Royce O'Neal, in my opinion, is he is more of a bench wing than a starting wing. And, you know, he's even kind of morphed into being more of like a small ball 4 than like a wing. Or, you know, kind of like sort of a wing, but sort of like kind of another guy who I think like defends maybe like 3.5s or 4s better than he does like smaller players. I think he would be a welcomed addition to the group. You can maybe talk me into him being the 5th starter, but I think with how Marcus is playing, how Jake is playing, how even Rui is playing, I think those guys are probably just better players and would make more sense. And like, that's not to say that Royce couldn't be helpful. And if you could find the right deal that is maybe like flipping Maxey for him or something, and you're just sort of adding him into the group, even if it is in a bench role, could he be a steadier player than Vando because he's a more reliable shooter and just like more trusted, probably 2-way guy? Like, sure. But I think he's more of a fringe starter and more of like a high level backup than a clear starter. And I think ideally you're trading for a clear starter who's like the 5th guy, and then that slots everybody else in a bench role. Roberto Carlos, when do you think Thero's first game will be? I think it'll be on the road trip. I will note that JJ said pregame, like he's harped on this being a developmental year for Thero and that he's not sure when he's going to play or make his debut. In a sense of like, I don't think right now he projects to be a rotation player for this team. So maybe he's cleared on the road, like fully cleared on the road trip and available, but only plays in like garbage time or something. Like I don't have a great sense. I understand the fan base is very excited for him. And I think there's a clear lane for him to fill that. Like he just has this athleticism and defense that no one else on the roster can really match outside of like a super locked in LeBron on that end. And that's valuable, but he is pretty raw offensively. He is a rookie. He is a 2nd round pick. And unfortunately he did not get to play in the preseason and do a lot in training camp. So he's a little bit behind the 8 ball in that sense. And JJ has talked about this largely as like just being a development year for him, and like next year more so being the season where he gets like the rotation shot. So sometimes coaches say that, and like, look, if he was available for the Portland game, he would have played in the Portland game because they were forced to throw Bronny and Nick Smith and different guys in there. So I think he would have played. It maybe injuries will you know, force that or allow that at some point. But if I had to guess, I think it's probably on the road trip, but maybe he's like a 1-shift guy or gets in a garbage time. I'm not expecting him to come in and be like a 20-minute a night rotation guy like immediately. Classy K, Dalton still struggling to make 3s consistently. Yeah, I mean, we'll pull it up. He went what? He hit 1 tonight. He went. Sorry, I have the. Okay, he went. I don't know if you guys use the ESPN box score, but this is an aside. It's very frustrating, the changes that they made to the box score. I'm not a fan of the new ESPN box score. He went 1 for 3 on 3s. And for the season, entering tonight, he was shooting 21%. So that went up technically, but probably not more than 23 or 24%. Like Dalton's too good of a shooter to be shooting 24% on 3s. Amaris, was Thero available to play today? No, he was out. There was some, we'll say, misreporting on that earlier. BC, how many games a year do I go to? Well, typically the last 4 the last 4 years, I've probably averaged like between 30 to 35 road games, and then basically every home game, unless I'm, sick or have some sort of family obligation or something. And then every playoff game. This year, it's probably going to end up being closer to 10. Like already I'm locked in Boston, the 2 New York games, Miami, 2 San Francisco games, technically 2 Clipper games. So that's already 7. And then I might go to a couple more. So I'll probably end up around 10 this year, and then all of the playoffs, which could be a long one. Classy K t-shirt with Verve across the back and Buha's, or across the front, Buha's block on the back. So I have a question for you guys, because one variation that we have discussed, and there is a mock of, would be like kind of like a meme shirt of me and different photos of me. And I'm not quite sure how many people would actually want a t-shirt with my face on it. So I like the idea of it, and I do think it's kind of funny. And it's sort of like playfully making fun of myself, but I don't know how much like people would be into that. So if you guys have an opinion on that, I would love to hear that feedback. Connor Phillips, are you still planning on doing playback tomorrow? I'll say it depends how I feel. I got hit. So I was out in Vegas with my son for the weekend and came back yesterday, and like probably 20, 30 minutes out from LA, I just hit like a wall, not literally, but just like I'd been kind of healthy for like a week. I was sick last week, and then whatever I was dealing with came back. And then today was rough, and was considering not going to the game, but I was like, I didn't go to the couple road games. I missed the Portland game. So I was like, I need to just like kind of push through and go. And like, I could barely get through the first half with just like sneezing and runny nose and all this stuff. And so I decided at halftime to come back, and was like, I at least tried. But I'll say it depends how I feel tomorrow. Adam says, don't jump on the "we don't need LeBron" bandwagon. They're beating mediocre teams in close games. I've never been on that bandwagon. I've never said they don't need LeBron. Ken P, what do you think about our two-way players? Do we need to leverage some better players who can contribute in spurts with injuries, etc.? Yeah, I think it's a little early to make a call in either direction, but I have not been blown away. Like Mignon, I think it's tough to, like, he had the ankle stuff. He was out for a lot of training camp in the preseason. So I give him a little bit of a pass and like a little bit of grace here. But as much as it pains me to say, like, Christian Coloco, I think is largely underwhelmed. He has not won over the coaching staff. And that could be a situation where does a guy like Drew Timme make more sense potentially? And then Nick Smith did have a couple of nice possessions and sequences in the Minnesota game, but other than that, I think has largely been underwhelming as well. So is he a guy who, like, RJ Davis is tiny, and that's like the big thing with him, is he's just like barely 6 feet, and it's just hard to be an NBA player at barely 6 feet. But he was awesome in the preseason, and like I thought he looked better than like Bronny Dalton and Nick Smith Jr. for most of the preseason, but there's like a size limitation there. So he's another guy, but I think it's probably a little bit too early to make that call, but I think it is trending toward at least one of the guys getting replaced at some point here coming up. Walter White, Jovan, would you accept the trade of Trey Murphy and Herb Jones for AR and expiring salary? Pelicans are 0-6, I think. That's a tough one. I mean, you'd have to really think about that. I would not trade AR for either one of them straight up, but the combination, I mean, it does like drastically change the team. Like Trey Murphy's gotten better as a playmaker, but he's not, I don't think he's close to the ball handler or playmaker that Austin is. And now, like, it's obviously potentially even more on Luka's plate, but then maybe it's dispersing it to LeBron and Marcus and Jake. And which you could probably get by with those guys, right? Like, but I just mean like divvying up the usage pie. Like you got to figure that out. Those are two, like, I mean, if your starting group is now Ayton, Luka, LeBron, Trey Murphy, Herb Jones, I think that's a team that could really compete with OKC. So that, like, to be clear, I do not think New Orleans would do this, but that would be the type of trade that would you would have to consider for Austin. Davion, thoughts on LeBron in-game rests when he gets back? Maybe he plays less minutes per game this year. Is going to help us when he's back, but curious if JJ holds him more accountable to full effort. I feel like there's been a little bit of revisionist history on like LeBron's effort. Like I did think the first month and a half was very up and down defensively, and there were certainly some lowlights. I think the Miami game is the biggest one that comes to mind, but like there were definitely some games, some quarters, some halves, some stretches LeBron took off defensively, and it's undeniable. At the same time, when the Lakers started their turnaround really in like late December, big part of it was the DFS trade, but a huge part of it was LeBron and the way that he carried the defense. And it was a weird year with the plus minus and the on off, splits and stuff. But like, if you like from that stretch of we'll just say like early January into early March before he got injured, he was their best defensive player. And DFS did play a role. Vando played a role. Jaxson Hayes played a role. Of course, AD and Max, before they got traded, played roles. But like LeBron was the drumbeat of the defense, and did so in big lineups, did so in small lineups, and also was carrying a pretty big offensive load as well, though Austin was of course like scaling up at that point. So I'm not saying you're calling out LeBron's effort, but I feel like there's been this narrative that he just like didn't try defensively last year, and I don't fully agree with that. Certainly there was some time, like, was he defending post-injury the same way that he was defending pre-injury? Probably not. Did he have the best defensive performance in the Minnesota series? No, but I don't think he was like entirely taking possessions off the way that some people have discussed it. But in terms of his minutes, I think you have to reduce his minutes. Like, now, to what extent, I think will be interesting to see how JJ navigates that, because Darvin Ham famously tried it for one game and LeBron did not go for it, and did not go for it on the court, did not go for it in the post-game press conference. And I think there's a different dynamic and relationship with LeBron and Darvin versus LeBron and JJ, but it will, like, understandably, I don't think LeBron is not going to want to play less. Like, LeBron is a competitor. LeBron's going to want to play as much as he possibly can. So I think it'll be interesting to see how LA handles that. Pat Greedy is the official name for Austin, Luka, and Jake Tres Leches. I like that. I like that a lot. I had not heard that before. Maybe I don't know if that's been going around on X. I had not seen that. Amaris, Jovan, you think this team is better than last year? 100%. I mean, just from a depth perspective, like, if you're saying like in a foxhole right now with guys that, I think if we argue that, let's just say for hypothetical sake here, Rui's the fifth starter, and you tell me it's Ayton, LeBron, Rui, Austin, Luka, I trust all five of those guys. Then you get to the bench and it's Marcus, Jake. That right there is seven I trust. Gabe and Jaxson, and maybe Vando, I trust in limited roles in certain contexts, and as long as LA is playing to their strengths. But like, already they didn't get past five players that JJ trusted. I think there's at least seven right now, and you could argue like Gabe did play well in the preseason, didn't play well as a starter, but I think will have his role corrected and reduced in like a proper way. That Gabe at 12 to 15 minutes is different than Gabe at 25 to 28 minutes. Jaxson, I think, has largely been positive this year. Like, he had the rough return against Minnesota, but outside of that, I think he's largely looked like the player that he was last season. And there are limitations with that in a playoff setting, but for the regular season, you can do much worse than Jaxson Hayes for 15 to 20 minutes. And tonight he played 32 with no DeAndre Ayton. And then Vando in a certain role, I think is fine. I guess 12 to 15 minutes is JJ's preference. So I think like Vando, for what it's worth, Vando and Gabe have looked better than they did last year in the limited sample size that we've seen. Then you upgraded the DFS spot. You moved Jaxson to the bench in a more proper role, added Ayton, and then you flipped DFS into Marcus and Jake. And so you're deeper. I think you're overall more skilled offensively. There's more firepower. Defensively, we'll see once this group is at full strength what that looks like. But like the offense, I think is probably just going to be so elite that you can get by with an average-ish defense. I just think they're going to have to make a move if they really want to compete with the OKCs and whatnot. Omaris, damn, do you pay for tickets? No, I get credentialed. So I do pay for travel though. And on average, I would say each road game is probably around all inclusive, like flight, Ubers, food, hotel. You're looking at like at least $1,000 per road game. So it does get pretty pricey. The numbers are probably a little bit lower on like a longer trip, but in general, you're probably looking at like $700 to $1,000 per game. And that's potentially on the low side, depending on the city. Like already looking at the Boston trip, that's going to be probably double that. New York is going to be double that. So it is expensive to travel. And that's probably the biggest shift or downside from going independent is like now I pay out of pocket rather than having the Athletic cover that. At the same time, I don't have to go to every game. I get to spend more time with my wife, with my son. Like previously it'd be like the second the season starts, I basically get sick and I'm sick and tired for the entire season. And now I think I have like a little bit of a better balance in terms of, not traveling as much. It's very physically taxing, but definitely going to travel again to like at least a quarter of the regular season games and then all the playoff games. I'm noticing I'm like very behind in the chat. Sorry, trying to keep up here. David Parks, what is the ideal 10-man rotation when everyone is healthy? For me, I would go Ayton, LeBron, Smart, Austin, Luka. And I'm more so looking at that through an offensive lens positionally, though defensively, it would be Luka as a forward, Marcus as a backcourt player, and then Rui, Jake, Gabe, Jaxson, Vando probably is my ideal 10-man. And then I would, if there's a way to upgrade the Jaxson spot or at least present a different type of big, like I think the healthy version of Maxi Kleba from like 3 years ago is a viable alternative to Jaxson because he's more of a perimeter defender, which Jaxson can do, but I actually think Jackson's gotten better with his verticality and his interior defense, and then also a stretch big. So if you could find either a clear upgrade over Jaxson or just like an alternative of similar value, maybe Maxi becomes that player, but we have not heard much about him either. So I don't know what's going on with that. And then of course, like the fifth starter, where I think if you can move Marcus to the bench, have that fifth starter, and then your bench is now like Marcus, Rui, Jake as your top 3 guys off the bench and like your top 8. And then now you're getting into Gabe, Jaxson, or Vando as like 9, 10, 11. That's like a much more comfortable place in like if Gabe's your 9th man or potentially he's even traded in this, but if there's a way to make Gabe like your 9th man, I think you have a really deep, like solid team. And I think that's like a group that I really have confidence in. What does it matter, bro? Thank you for the super chat. DFS's defensive impact last year is overblown. He already lost a step and had a bum ankle while he was here. He could only guard 4s. We're good there already. I mean, I thought he was valuable as a small ball 5 defender, though, depending on the matchup, you could argue it was LeBron or Rui. Going back to it quickly last season, he actually helped them more probably on the offensive end with the pick and pop ability, but just going back to the on-off last year, just to look at it quickly. With DFS, Lakers were 10 points per 100 possessions better offensively and almost 5 points per 100 possessions better defensively. His 109 defensive rating was the best mark of any rotation player. The guys better than him were Jalen Hood-Schifino, Christian Koloko, and Trey Jemison. So I'm not counting Koloko or Jemison. I'm only looking at guys who played, we'll say 500 or more minutes, because that includes Jordan Goodwin and Vando. So yeah, I mean, I think DFS was more impactful as a team defender than like a one-on-one defender. Like he was not the like lockdown, like Amen Thompson, Herb Jones, Monty Kamara type guy, but I thought he was really important for the backline communication and rotations, and objectively, at least per the lineup data, he led the team in defensive rating in terms of on-off, and he also led the team in offensive rating. So like, the Lakers he was the plus-minus net rating leader for this group. And that was not as a starter either, because most of the time he was coming off the bench, except for the stretch that Rui missed, and then the end of the Lakers Wolves series. So it wasn't like he was in a lot of like the Luka and the Goons lineups, which did well, but like he was a big part of that. So I agree in general that like he's slightly overrated as a defender, but I actually think his impact was probably underrated, just from like, they defended at a higher level with him than without him. Now we could debate why that is, but that's my opinion. Kevin Cambridge, Jovan, you got to get Jake on Buha's block during the offseason. That would be fire. I'm working on it. I am working on it. I'm trying. Xavier, why don't you like Jaxson in backup minutes? I can get with an additional big, but I don't think we have to necessarily replace him. I have some concerns in a playoff setting, to be completely honest, but like, because I think he largely looked like, I think the floor with Jaxson can be really low, where like especially when he picks up offensive fouls, he has a propensity to like spiral a little bit and sort of compound his mistakes. So I do feel like in general, the floor, like he's become more consistent than he was like 2 years ago, and certainly like the first half of last season. But the floor with Jaxson can be to the point where he just, like, sometimes there's like within the first 2 minutes of Jaxson being out there, you're like, this is a bad Jaxson game, and he's like not playable. And I would like to have if I'm the Lakers, I'd like to have a backup that's like a little bit more reliable and steady personally. But I think more realistically, it's probably just like an alternative that you can go to in a matchup based situation. I also do look at like some of the other backup, like it kind of depends who you view as like backup options. But like because a lot of teams start two bigs now, right? But like if you're saying like Hartenstein is the backup for OKC, or like Steven Adams is the backup for Houston, like those guys are just better players than Jaxson. So I don't know. Like I will say I like made the point. Like I've been pleasantly surprised, or not surprised, but like Jaxson has picked up where he left off last regular season. He's not really missed a beat. And outside of maybe the Minnesota game, I think he's looked like that player, and that's been encouraging. So we'll like, it's game 7. We'll see if he keeps that up. But if he keeps this up, then like you probably don't need the backup upgrade, or maybe just the alternative, just to kind of, have a little bit more depth there. Because if Ayton or Jackson's out, it gets real thin right now, right? Like you automatically go to Koloko or small ball. And I think you probably want, especially with how the West is, OKC's big, Denver's big, Houston's big, San Antonio's big, probably Minnesota's big. Like you want size and depth, and I think they could probably use one more playable center. I'm seeing the JHS. Kane Carter, what's your question? Keon Park, I missed the game. You missed a hell of a game. Really, 43 points in the first for LA, 77 in the first half, season high 130. Really good passing and shooting. though surprisingly not really from Luka and Austin. But despite that, they still found ways to be really effective with the passing, with the drives, with the constant paint pressure. Kane Carter, hey Jovan, what do you think is worse to have as a GM? One who's trigger happy gunner, or one that is afraid to make a trade? Trigger happy gunner, as we are seeing in New Orleans with Joe Dumars, and one of the worst trades. It's like not going to get like, okay, it's not like Luka level bad, but it's just like one of the craziest trades I can remember, because there was literally no reason to do that trade. There was no argument at the time. And New Orleans seemingly thought they were going to be good, even though anyone with like a pulse could see that that was like at best a back end playing team when healthy, at very best. And the fact that they did that trade and really did not, probably could have traded, should not have given that much up to trade up for Derek Queen, but also probably could have traded even back a little bit and still gotten Queen. I just like that. That's a horrible trade. Like they might give Atlanta the number 1 pick, which is just absurd. I don't get it. So sorry, I went down to Joe Dumars rabbit hole here. Point being, like, you can do a lot of damage by being trigger happy and doing the wrong trade. You can obviously do damage by not making a trade and like letting a window pass, which I would argue that I think in general, the Lakers mismanaged the LeBron AD window. Like, it ended up working out and they somehow were able to pull off Luka, but the actual like LeBron, especially in between, say like the Russ trade and eventually the Luka trade, like I think there was a lot of mistakes they made during that stretch that were ultimately detrimental, and in some ways being a little bit too passive with trying to upgrade the roster. It worked out, but I guarantee in 2022 and 2023, 23, they did not have this like, oh, we're getting Luka in 2 years because Nico Harrison is going to galaxy brain him coming off of a finals run and think he's out of shape and want to trade him. Like, that was not their plan. So just like Nico Harrison can say whatever, but he did not plan to get Cooper Flag. The Lakers can say whatever. They did not plan at that time to get Luka. That he was on their radar long term. So I think it's worse to be trigger happy because you could really do some damage, but I think it is not as bad, but still bad to just be a passive GM who does not do much. Bruce, Jovan, I usually hear content on Spotify. Is there any difference / preference for you on which app we hear you? No. I just care that you watch and or listen. And as long as you're watching and or listening, whatever's easiest for you, whatever's your preference is cool with me. David Parks, thoughts on Keldon Johnson? He recently fell out of the Spurs rotation. Let's see what he did tonight, because I feel like he's actually... He led their bench tonight. He's been a little up and down, but he's played 23 or more minutes in 5 of their 6 games. So he's kind of been the bench leader for them. I don't think he's very available right now, to be honest. He's kind of been a small ball 4 for them. I mean, he's averaging 12 and 6 on the season, shooting 63% overall. I mean, I'd be interested in him, but I don't know how likely that is. Kevin Cambridge, drop a like on the video. Late Night Gang. Yeah, let's get those likes up. Again, I can never see the likes, but I see them after. Hen, Jovan, the Lakers Collective is such a cool idea. I'm so happy you guys have teamed up to do it. Great content. Thank you. Yeah, it's been really fun to team up with Trevor and Jason. And once I heard about, once I was pitched on the idea and I heard who was potentially on board, it was a pretty quick decision on my part. And, I know from you guys, like Jason and Trevor have been the 2 most requested guests. When I did my audience survey, those were the 2 most requested guests. I think like a Lakers player or like Zach Lowe, like they were also up there. But I know like people have really enjoyed our, the viewership numbers have been great when I've had them on. The viewership numbers with the podcast have already been great. So I'm really excited about it, and definitely a chance that we expand it in the coming weeks and months to potentially twice a week, and definitely we'll be doing more content like in the playoffs. So I'm excited for it. Gary Singh, I don't know if the answer, not sure if bad game. Yeah, I mean, I talked about Wiggins earlier. I thought it was a fine, like there were some things he did with the cutting and the rebounding and I thought like defensively he was fine to solid. It wasn't like a great or like good defensive performance, but you saw his versatility switching across multiple positions. It was not the best audition, and it was not Jeremy. Remember a couple years ago, or might have been last year, but either last year or a couple years ago when Jeremy Grant had the game where he went 1 for 11 against the Lakers, and it was like, I think actually his first couple games against the Lakers, he was like a combined like 2 for 20 something, and it was like, okay, Jeremy Grant, I guess you will not be a Los Angeles Laker outside of Portland having a ridiculous asking price for you. So, I mean, it was not the best Wiggins performance, but I think they could do worse than Wiggins. Connor Phillips, if you could ask any current or former Lakers player a question that they had to answer with 100% honesty, who would you ask and what would your question be? I don't know. That's a tough one to answer off the top of my head. I would like to ask LeBron about the Russ trade and how much of that was really him, and maybe at what point in the situation was he out on Russ, like how quickly. I would also like to ask AD, because there's obviously been so many conspiracies and different theories with the whole AD Luka trade and everything that was going on. I would like to ask AD if he had any inkling that he was going to be traded. That would be an interesting one. So I think like a couple of the bigger storylines over the last few years that I've covered, I would like to have like crystal clarity to, if I could. Of course, you could go back to like the Kobe Shaq days and like kind of ask either one of those guys like what was real within some of that stuff, what wasn't, because I feel like Shaq has kind of retroactively tried to downplay it when like at like a lot of the reporting and like books that have come out of that era, and then even talking to people who were part of that era in terms of like players and or people who covered it were like, no, like a lot of that stuff was real. So I would like to maybe like that. That's obviously one of the biggest what ifs in NBA history, because that I feel like they could have still won multiple championships together, and if they get 5 or 6 rings, like they're probably like the undisputed like best duo of all time. So yeah. Kevin Cambridge, if you guys ever do a guest on the Lakers Collective, you guys should bring Uncle Slee through. I know you've been on Sliwa's show a couple times, and so has Trev. Yeah, I love Sliwa. Actually, I'm gonna try to have him on my show this week. So would love to have him on. I think as you guys have seen with the Great Western Forum, which is the other group pod I do, like I think sometimes when you have 4 or 5 people on a show, it's just a little tough for everybody to get shots up. It's like there's only one basketball, right? There's only one mic at a time. And you gotta, I think like 3 is probably the perfect number. But if we do expand and have a guest slot or a guest segment, Slee's definitely on the short list. Kane Carter actually with a good one. Jovan, would you ever ask LeBron about his fallout with Drake? I'm still kind of sad about that, not gonna lie. Yeah, I mean, we did talk about it. I'm not going to share what he said, but we did talk about it right after the like that situation, because I was just curious to get his perspective on like, because he was getting some backlash at the time of like, why are you singing like that when they're dissing Drake and that's your boy? So we did have a conversation about that. I will not share what he said, but he obviously has felt a certain way about things, and Drake's felt a certain way about things, and it is what it is. But I would like to have like, we have not talked about that since then, because then it went to a different level with like, once like Not Like Us and all that stuff happened, I was like, all right, I kind of feel like I know where things are at, but would love to have clarity on that too. David Parks, should JJ try out a 3-2 zone with Vando, Marcus, and Jake defending up top, and DA staying ready for transition buckets on steals? I actually like the idea of DA being up there, or like Jaxson being up there and just like wreaking havoc. I think this is actually where LeBron being out hurts, where having LeBron as one of the two low men. If you had like, if you had like LeBron and Jake, or LeBron and Luka as the two low men, and then you had Vando, Marcus, and Jaxson, Vando, Marcus, and DA as three of the top guys, I think that's something that would be interesting. I think one of the issues for this group in general, and I think I've talked about this before, I think it's why they run a little bit more of a conservative defensive scheme, is like, I think they're often at a speed and athleticism disadvantage against most opponents. Just like from a pure speed and athleticism perspective, they are one of the slower teams in the league. So, especially defensively. So I think one of the issues with a zone is like, you have to be very active in covering a lot of ground, and like you're guarding more of an area and a space rather than an individual player. And I think like with some of the breakdowns we've seen from this group, like it's easy to see, like I could see it working specifically with like maybe the 5 or 6 guys I mentioned. I could also see a version of this where they just get like shredded for 2 minutes, and then it's like, all right, let's get out of this 3-2 zone. But I'm a fan in general of experimentation and trying out different things. So I'm like, I would test it out at least. And again, I think having LeBron as a backline guy, and maybe it's LeBron and Marcus as the two backline guys, and then you have Jake's got good hands, and I think Vando should be at the top no matter what. Sometimes putting a big up there kind of messes with the team offensively, especially if you have a more mobile, like Jaxson and Ayton by big man standards are on the more mobile athletic side. So yeah, I think it's definitely something to try. Honcho, serious question with full respect and pause. Are the Lakers the most handsome team in the league? I don't know. I don't know. Gary Singh, thank you for super chat. Do players like Braun talk to you a lot off the record? Yeah. I mean, I think like in general, you got to make an effort to talk to players off the record, but certainly, being in the locker room, you hear stuff, you pick up on stuff. It gives you an opportunity to talk to people. And that's been one of the nice things with me. Like before, when I was a beat writer, I have to be in the scrum. I have to be listening to whoever's talking. But like now I have the flexibility to kind of roam around and talk to people more freely. I do think you get better off the record conversations on the road. And that's one of the biggest things I have missed. And like one of the biggest reasons for me to travel is getting those on the road reps. But definitely I would say, there's obviously players I talk to more, players I talk to less, but there's a lot of stuff that you will hear. And like one interesting thing is like how candid a player, like you might talk to a player in an interview and they say like XYZ, and then the second the cameras are off and the microphones are off, they will like tell you the truth immediately, or like completely contradict whatever they just said publicly. And it's been an interesting thing to like kind of see like some guys cannot help themselves, and a guy who I think of immediately is Dennis Schroeder, who like outed like, you know, LeBron going to Germany, and like, you know, it was particularly a lot of LeBron secrets that he would kind of spill. But some guys have like no filter and just can't help themselves. Some guys are a little bit more polished, a little bit more PR'd, and they will have certain answers. And the second you get them off to the side, they're like, here's what really happened. Here's the truth. So really depends on the player, but yeah, definitely have off the record conversations. Kevin Cambridge, funniest guy on the team. I think Ayton's up there. I think Luka's got like a dark sense of humor. Luka's very like sarcastic, and I think there's like you know, Marcus is up there, Jackson's up there, Ayton, AR is funny too. Like I think it's a pretty funny, like good chemistry group, but I would say Luka, Ayton, LeBron, Marcus, like those are some of the guys I'd throw in there. Connor Phillips, who's your favorite player to talk to about non-basketball topics? I would say it used to be AD, but now probably LeBron. I mean, just with LeBron, it's like anything he says, you know, I think Bill Simmons talked about it with Michael Jordan with the whole NBC thing about how, you know, it doesn't really matter what Michael Jordan's saying on the NBC broadcast. You just want to hear it. And I think it's a similar thing with LeBron, where whatever he's saying is just like, it's interesting because of who he is and his status as one of the icons of American sports. On otherwise, they have had a pretty like revolving door of players, obviously, through the years. So it's like, you know, I throw Austin in there too. Luka and I have talked a bit. We probably talked more last season up to this point, but yeah. So those are some of the guys. BC, LeBron doesn't talk much to most reporters, I bet. He actually is pretty friendly. LeBron, like not, you know, I'm seeing some of the stuff like leaking or gossip, not like that. It's just more like LeBron likes like good conversations, and he will, like, there's been plenty of times where we will stay later in the locker room because we're talking to LeBron. Not now as much. He hasn't been around in the locker room as much when we've been in there, but going back to like last season and previous seasons, LeBron likes to talk. Gary Singh, why does Shams always first to break major news? He's the most plugged in. You know, the news cycle is, without getting too much into it, it is pretty transactional. So he's getting information from different places. He is trading that information, and he is getting that information from people. You know, I think that's where it's like, it's not just breaking news, but on some level, he's also like an information broker to other teams and agents and players and whatever. So, you know, before, when it was Woj and Shams, it was more Woj had, you know, the general kind of breakdown was Woj had more of like the front office people, and Shams had more of the agents and players. And now he has his pick of everybody. So, I mean, I will say, like, he works his face off, and, you know, I previously worked with him at The Athletic. We worked on, you know, we broke news together before. We've done multiple stories together, and there was I can speak to his work ethic firsthand of calling and texting at all hours and times, night, morning. Like, you know, there'd be times we'd be working on a story till like 12 or later, and then he's hitting me up at like 6 a.m. and I'm like, this dude just is a machine. He just works nonstop. So definitely like a personal life trade-off, as you guys have seen with like his screen time, and he's talked about like walking out on dates and stuff. But so I want to be clear, like he works very hard and he deserves it. I just, it is like an interesting spot, and not just in the NBA, in all sports. The newsbreakers are very much like, it's grown into this thing where they have all this like power and information that it almost like transcends the like the industry in a way. My screen time, I see somebody asking, I've never even checked my screen time. I'm going to tell you, it's not going to be 16 hours. For this week, it's been 4.5 hours. So yeah, that's not too bad. Probably was higher before. I've tried to reduce it. Gee, you or K Price in a 1-on-1 to 11. Who's winning? Is this Kobe Price? I'm packing his ass. He's done for. JM Disculpa. What are the chances LeBron comes back against the Thunder? I feel like that's on the early side. I think it's probably more likely coming back out of that road trip that they have like a stretch of 2 out of 3 home games. All right. Going a little bit longer. I told you guys I was going to go 2 hours. I tried to go shorter. Classy K, you guys did some good stuff. I appreciate it. Sarah, have you ever been golfing with the players? No, but I have been told by Austin, if I learn how to golf, I can golf with him. So I got to get on that. Xavier, Jovan, you hoop. I tore my Achilles 2 years ago, so I don't hoop as much as I used to. I used to be in like men's leagues and like hoop every weekend. Now, after going through like a traumatic injury, you just kind of, I never want to go through that again. I had to do PT for almost a year. It was rough. So like the joy and the upside of playing is outweighed by like the fear of another major injury. And especially once you tear your Achilles once, like there's some more risk. Kevin Cambridge, not really listening to anything in my daily rotation. I honestly just listen to a bunch of podcasts. I probably go through 4 or 5 podcasts a day, at least. So, a lot of YouTube and podcasts, honestly. JB, can you dunk? Not anymore. Because I honestly don't really try to jump too much. When I play, like I'm very much ground bound, but I would say in my prime, like barely. I do have the Jokic Serbian, more of a ground bound skilled player than like an above the rim aerial attack, if that makes sense. Connor Phillips, who on the Lakers roster do you think you could score the most on in a 1v1? Oof. I don't know if there's a good answer to that, so I might sidestep this one, but maybe I'll tell you in private. Classy K, I do know what Kyrie's going through. It's rough. JM, what are the podcasts you like to listen to? I listen to, so of course, like bunch of NBA podcasts, Zach Lowe Show, Bill Simmons. I'll watch. So it's like a mix of podcasts and watching, because like on YouTube, I'll more so consume like Lakers Nation or Hoops Tonight on like YouTube, and then in audio format, I'll listen to like LFR. In general, I try to like limit my Lakers listens because I don't want it to influence my thoughts. But sometimes I will pick up an observation that maybe someone else picked up on that I missed, or they have a different perspective. But I try to keep it more like general NBA, just because I feel like I'm so in the Lakers weeds that sometimes I want like to just hear more about what's going on with the rest of the league. But definitely Zach Lowe Show, Bill Simmons, Russillo, and NBA specific for those two, right? Like I'm not really listening to the other stuff, but NBA specific, Hoop Collective. Let's see here. What else? I listen to some other stuff. Like, I don't know if you guys are into like the content. Like I'll listen to some fantasy football stuff. I will listen to, Think Media, Colin and Samir show. A little bit more of Pablo Finds Out recently. Press Box and Dunked On. Though those are the Tim Ferriss. Those are the primary ones I listen to. BC, I want to see Jovan versus Jason Timpf. Timpf would beat me. Let him up. Did the coaches ever play the media? Not yet, but if they do, I will be there. Golden, biggest surprise and disappointing teams. Biggest surprise has to be Chicago at 5-1. I did not see that coming. I mean, I'll do one for each conference. In the East, it has to be Chicago at 5-1. In the West, I would say right now, Portland at 4-2. They look really good. And I think if you told me Portland's like the 8 seed, I wouldn't be like shocked anymore. Like, I don't think they're going to maintain a top 4 seed in the West, but Portland at 4. The biggest disappointment in the East, it's got to be Orlando. Probably honestly a tie between Orlando and Atlanta, but I lean more Orlando. Atlanta, their point differential, it's close. In the West, it's probably Dallas, although I think you could also argue for Minnesota. I'm between Dallas and Minnesota, but I probably lean Dallas. Hen asking if I play video games. I play Fortnite. That's been like a low key addiction for me lately. I've been very into Fortnite. But otherwise, that's it. Kane Carter, hey, Jovan, you prefer dramatic players who are loud and raw in press conferences or quiet PR train guys? 100% loud and raw. Pause. Pause, but give me it loud and raw. Oh, man. Gary Singh, thank you for the super chat. Where do you think Luka can get to all-time rank? Oh, high, very high. I think he's on a borderline top 10 trajectory already. I think the X factor is just going to be how many titles he wins. I think he's going to get at least one, but you know, if you get one, now you're kind of in that like Giannis rate, like then you're probably in the top 20. To get to top 10, I think he's going to need multiple. And or like maybe multiple MVPs, and it's more like a Jokic situation where he's won multiple MVPs, but he has like one title. I think if we're talking like peak, I mean, I think there's a world in which he can go down as the GOAT. I think it's I wouldn't like bet on it, right? Like I think he would probably have to sustain a similar level of production for the next like decade, plus win like multiple MVPs and multiple championships. Like if we're talking in 2035, I don't know why it took me so long to add 10 years. If Luka has like 3 MVPs and 4 titles, I think he's a top 10 player and probably knocking on the top 5, but it's so tough to say without knowing. Like, I think it's a little bit different. If he already had won a title or 2, then I think we could project it a little bit easier, but I can't tell you with great certainty how many titles he's going to win. And we just know, like, if you look at the top 10, I mean, whatever order you want to do, but obviously LeBron, Jordan, Magic, Kobe, Shaq, Bird, Duncan, all those guys have at least 3 titles. Then like eventually you get down to like the Will, Hakeem, Jerry West then the titles are not as prominent as like the top guys. But I should have mentioned Kareem as well. But like, you get my point. Like all the top, like whatever is your top 8 or 9, those guys all probably have 3+ titles. You could throw Steph in somewhere in the back 10 mix. So like, I think the barometer for him is probably 3 titles at a minimum. And you can't say with great certainty, like OKC still there. San Antonio is about to be a thing. Like I think he gets at least 1 title, but where he ranks will probably come down to, does he get 4 or does he get 1? Does he get 3 or does he get 2? Right? Like there's going to be some variance there. So it's tough to say. Engrid, what's your height, Jovan? You look really tall. I'm 6'5", so probably 6'6" in shoes, but yeah. JM, do you think they will rest Luka tomorrow? I think Luka plays. G, how many games is OKC winning this year? I will say 66. Connor Phillips, you need a minimum of 2 to be top 10. Yeah, that's fair. Drew, you should stream your gameplay. Are we talking on maybe Twitch? A little Twitch going? A little Twitch action? Most likely, Xavier, most likely record until Christmas, 9-4, 10-3. Let's look at it. Here, I'll pull it up. Wow, we're going longer than normal here. That's how you know. That's how you know I'm feeling well. At Port. Okay, so through they got more than, they got 3, 6, 9, 12, 15, 18. They got 19 games until Christmas. I will say it does get a lot harder. I think this road trip's going to be pretty tough. The LeBron will be returning soon. And then this stretch of the like Utah, Clippers, Dallas, New Orleans, Phoenix, Toronto, even Boston, that's a pretty winnable stretch. So I'll say, conservatively, like 13, maybe 13-6 in that 19 games, 14-5, 13-6, something like that. I said 6-4 to start. They're 5-2. They're probably gonna be 7-3. BC says he's 6'4", so tall gang. We got some tall people in the late night gang. Morris, Luka or SGA, who goes down having a better career? That's tough because I think Luka's numbers are going to be better, but if Shea wins like, again, 3 or 4 titles and gets like 2 or 3 MVPs, he's going to have the accolades maybe above Luka. But I guess like gun to my head, I would lean Luka. But there's I think the person better set up to have team success is SGA right now, just because he's got, you could argue, 2 other top 20 players, not even in their mid-20s yet. So OKC is just a very unique situation. Angelo, hi, Jovan. Do you have a preference which broadcast to listen to for the road games? Always love Stu and Billy, but I've really enjoyed the new Prime team. Yeah, depends. It depends on the broadcast crew, and I'm not going to get into which ones I like or which ones I don't. But certainly, some games are obviously just the Spectrum feed, and in that case, I always prefer the Lakers over the opponent. So I will always pick Spectrum over the opposing broadcast. But if it is national, it depends on the announcers. I do, especially now with NBC and Amazon being like new players in the game, I have enjoyed like their broadcasts and just kind of the novelty of it, and also them celebrating basketball and some of the high level X's and O's and film breakdowns they've done and stuff. So still getting, like, I would say in general, like more often than not, I'm probably listening to Spectrum, but certainly I've tested out NBC and Prime as well. David Parks, top 5 favorite music artists. I mean, Drake's my number one. I would throw Eminem in there. I would throw pre-2016 Kanye in there. I would throw peak Lil Wayne. And I was really big on The Weeknd before he went like super mainstream and pop. Like his first few mixtapes and even like first album or two, I was high on, and then I haven't been as high on him lately, but it'd be hard for me not to throw The Weeknd in there. Frank Ocean also deserves a nod. So those are some of my biggest ones. Morris, Kendrick. Look, I know it's LA. I know. I'm sure there's a lot of Kendrick fans in here. It's just, he did my boy dirty last year. L. A. What's up, Keone? Does OKC decline Hartenstein's option in the offseason? They might. I think it's going to depend on like how the season goes and where some of the holes are in OKC's rotation or just like performance wise. But there's certainly a chance that due to finances, he does, or they do with his. All right. I'm going to wrap here though. I have gone a bit over 2 hours. I appreciate you all. I will be back in less than 24 hours. Lakers got a game tomorrow night in Portland. I will potentially be doing a playback. I will let you guys know. But one favor I ask of you guys is just in the comments, or I did a post on YouTube, did a post on Discord. So if you guys would prefer to respond there, that's fine as well. But would love to know what you guys think in terms of merch and what type of merch you want to see from me. And, could be, I know some people said cups and stickers and hoodies and different. So all that stuff is great. And also if you'd be interested in potentially kind of it feels funny saying it, but a shirt or something with my face on it and sort of like a meme kind of shirt. And if not, then I, just kind of testing out different things right now and trying to see what people will be interested in. Just want to make merch that you guys will want and will want to wear and will be high quality, and would love to get some feedback on that. But appreciate you guys. Shout out to the Late Night Gang. For those watching on YouTube, please be sure to hit that subscribe button, turn on channel notifications, and like and comment on this video. On the road to 50K subscribers by the end of 2025. So make sure you hit that subscribe button. About 40% of you who watch consistently are not yet subscribed. Takes 2 seconds to subscribe, and it'll make sure you never miss a video or live stream. And for those listening on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or your podcast platform of choice, please be sure to follow, download, and leave a 5-star review. Make sure you check out channel memberships. Make sure you check out the Buha's Block Discord. I'll be back in 22 hours. I will talk to you all then.